Thanks very much for coming along. Just give a very quick 30 seconds on South China Diving Club for those who don't know us. We are a non-profit club dedicated to promoting diving in Hong Kong. We like to get out, dive, explore regularly, trying to get to some of the less dive sites or find new ones through the summer, at least twice a month, 3 times a month, and also all through the year. So a lot of interesting diving. We are under a sort of BSAC club, which allows us to provide well-recognised diver qualifications, and we also use their sort of diving safety standards recommendations for organising our boats. But we recognise, and the word missing there, but we recognise and welcome everybody with all diving qualifications, regardless of agency. And a lot we kind of believe in sort of try and have as much fun as we can. We're quite serious about staying safe when we're out diving and continuing our sort of skill and experience development whenever we can. And so, to introduce myself, I'm Simon Chivers. Have dived a lot with Simon on a number of trips, but particularly on 3 of his Truk Lagoon trips, hence why I'm having a few words to say about it. I'm also recently elected chairman of South China Diving Club. So, I also noticed, I think my mum's on under the guise of Susan's iPhone, so everybody keep their language straight. And I think a lot of you know Simon, but this is Simon from Insider Divers. That's my mum not on mute. He always organises a lot of trips all around the world. He'll tell you about that in the course of this evening. Welcome, Simon, to start things off.
The mum's on microphone. Hey, Simon's mom, can you put mute?
No, stay where you are.
All right. So yeah, my name is Simon. This is my company. Just until about 1 month ago, it was a one-man company. Now it's a 2-person company. So I just hired first person. COVID obviously changed the game, as in there was no business, and we're back in full force. What do? We do group trips, scuba diving, or let's say any aquatic group trips. Yeah. So this is from a trip that Simon was on as well. Actually, this is in the Yamagiri. So here's a group of recreational divers. He was in the tech group, I think, on that trip. What we do is it's always group trips. So we don't do individual stuff. We're not a travel agent. We organize group trips in all kinds of ways. So we do a lot of whale stuff. We do a lot of scuba diving. We do some photo workshops, and we do rec and tech trips. So we kind of cover everything that there's in terms of exciting things, kind of cover the globe. We really have everything, not all the time. We're small. But every year we've got lots of interesting things. So later you can check out what we do on our website. Also, I want to mention that all of our trips are expert-led, as I call it. So there's always somebody to take care of the trip, of you guys, and usually will carry extra knowledge. So if you're diving to Truk Lagoon, you've got this guy here, who is an instructor, very skilled instructor, who teaches all the way down to 2 different types of rebreathers and all kinds of other specifications. So this guy is there to assist everybody who's diving recreationally and tech to make the right dive plans. Yeah, and that's very important in a place like this, as Simon will explain later. So my job today is to give you a bit of a mouth-watering about Truk Lagoon and historic background, and then Simon will talk about the actual diving, and we will take the bigger chunk of this presentation. So Truk Lagoon, we call it the rec capital of the world. Why? It is the world's best rec diving. I swear it was there before. I think the controller. Yeah, can you try to? This seems to be a little bit cut off. Just go to the zoom one back. So it's the world's best rec diving. Why is it the world's best rec diving? Well, for starters, you've got tons and tons of complete ships. You can dive there for a month. I swear you will not see everything, but it is all within a small area. So this is my favorite ship. This is the Nippon Maru, and this is a very good example of the kind of diving you expect. Complete ships with everything intact. So you've got a tank here in the front, for example. You've got gas masks. You've got all kinds of stuff. It's blue water. It's warm and it's clear. Literally everything you want if you want to go wreck dive. On top of that, you're in the middle of the Pacific, so you get fantastic coral coverage on the outside of the wrecks. And the wrecks are littered literally with amazing artifacts. If you've ever dived in Coron or any wreck diving in North America, Europe, all the good stuff's all gone. It's basically walls and doors. Whereas in Truk Lagoon, you get all the stuff still there. I mean, of course, they've taken some things, but literally, there's so many artifacts lying around, such as live ammunition. So these are live 16-inch shells lying around. You've got not only ammunition, you've got big gunnery, tanks, you've got machine guns, you've got mortars, you've got everything lying around there with a crust of seabed over it, but you can see these things. Big tanks, big trucks, big planes, you name it. You've got all these different things that you can see. It's not like empty, it's loaded with stuff. Yeah? This is from the Nippo. It's a very good example where you can really imagine traveling in time. This is the bridge of the Nippo Maru. You can see the wooden deck boards still fully intact. Now, I don't know how that works, by the way. Every dive group that does this goes through there, and somehow nobody broke any of the wooden planks yet. So it's an amazing thing to be here. The ship's slightly on the side. You can see the steering wheel. You can see the double telegraph. It's all there. It's amazing. Taking it a step further, because it's in such stable conditions in this area, deep exploration is possible, and it's very well known. The guides know every corner. So even as a recreational diver, you obviously don't tell Paddy, but you can go far in to the wrecks. You just follow your guide, and he will take you in and out. So you can do engine rooms. You can see galleys, right? If you spend the time, you can see insane details, like the steering wheel of one of these trucks, or for example, the complete dials with glass and some engine parts. Right? It's absolutely insane how intact everything is. And discretion, some people died, and there are actually some leftovers. This here is the most famous one. This is the red skull, which was actually removed a month after I took this photo. I might be the last one who took a photo of it. So the Japanese over the years have come and actually retrieved the leftovers and give them burials, but there are dive sites where you still sometimes come across. So in a nutshell, you've got over 60 wrecks lying around in blue, warm water, yeah, easy accessible, loaded with artifacts. There's no place in the world where you got this. This is why it's amazing. This is why anybody who goes, Danny just told me, you know, I've been there, I want to go again. That's what literally everybody says. Everybody said who goes there wants to go again, because you only scrape the top. In a week, you might see, if you're doing recreational diving 3 wrecks a day, you do the math, you know, you do 18 ships in a week. If you're doing one different one every time, which you usually don't. So there's so much. Let's talk a bit about the background. Truk Lagoon is actually not really a thing. That's just what we call it. The place is called Truk. Truk is the country, and you can see the name is very similar. I'll talk about it in a second. Where is it? And it's the middle of nowhere. Okay, it's in the middle of the Pacific. Here's a dot. Yeah. Here you can see it's about this area. So you've got Guam and the Mariana Trench. You've got Palau and the Palau Trench, and you've got this. It's not a trench per se, but it's an underwater canyon, and it's on the rim of one of these canyons. It's in the middle of the Caroline Islands. So you've got the Caroline Islands. Palau is here, and Guam for orientation. So all of this is called the Caroline Islands. And the Federated States of Micronesia are these 4 states that are all basically collected island nations. So you've got Yap, you've got Truk, Ponape, and Kozra. All together are 610 islands, or atolls. So I should say atolls, not islands, it's more atolls. So 610 atolls all together make the Federated States of Micronesia. And this is what it looks like. Pretty horrible, right? So this is a typical picture of what you see in Truk. So you've got the tips of old volcanoes sticking out the water, surrounded by amazing reefs and blue water. Pretty decent starting point for a good dive trip, isn't it? If we go higher up, we go to satellite, we can see what it looks like from the top. So you've got a perfect ring all the way around, and that's quite important. That ring is over 200 kilometers long, yeah, and pretty much is complete, which means it protects it for heavy wave action, heavy currents, all that stuff that would destroy wrecks, and that's why it's so well protected. If you look at it from the topography underneath the ocean, outside of the atoll, it goes down to 3,500 to 4,000 meters. So you've got really rich water, which goes in through the channels, and that's how you've got good coral. So that's all playing part in why it's such an amazing place. So like I said, it's part of the Federal States of Micronesia. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So 225 kilometers is the protective ring around, and there's 55,000 people in there, which is the largest of the 4 states, but actually very low density because they have so many islands that basically there's no people there. What you can see as a reference, Buenos City is the capital and the largest city of all of Micronesia. It has 12,000 inhabitants. Here's a picture I always like to show what it looks like there. This is the one cemented road that they have. Actually, when I started going there, it was cemented here, but it wasn't cemented all the way to Blue Lagoon where we stay. Now the cement road is sort of connecting all the way there. But they literally have one road. You can see here the road. Yeah, and then this is the harbor. And here's a picture of the entire city, the capital. Yeah? So you got the airport, you got the harbor, you got downtown, the government building. Government building is here. There's one building which has the entire government. All the ministries are in there, 2 floors. And then basically peters out. So kind of an impression of how big it is. It was actually much bigger when it was part of the Japanese Empire. So I'm going to talk a bit about that because that's basically how these wrecks came to be. So the history of Truk, well, it was an island chain. They were all individual people. There were no such thing as Chukis per se. These were just individual Pacific islands. And the Spanish came in. Actually, Magellan was one of the guys who came through there. Magellan was actually in Truk. And then for many, many years, it was part of the Islas Carolinas. So this area didn't really use it because it's not very productive. You know, there was betel nut and coconut. There's not really much to have. So they had it, but didn't do much of it. And at the decline of the Spanish Empire, the Germans took it over, and then after World War I, the Japanese took it over. And the Japanese, they did have good use for it, because the Japanese were starting to claim all of Asia. They really took over pretty much all of Southeast Asia, half of China, all the way into Mongolia, all of this, and they protected it, which was called the Ring of Fire. So the Ring of Fire were all these islands. So you see here, so here is the, Marshall Islands, here's Truk, Solomon Islands. All of these islands were fortified all the way down into Palau. If anybody's ever been to Palau, you have lots of Japanese wrecks there too. All of these islands had strategic bases across them. And Truk was a super important one. You can see it was not on the full outside. Yeah? So it was a forward base, a place where they supplied the ships and particularly repaired a lot of ships. It was actually the largest Navy base in the Ring of Fire. It was really big, the equivalent of Pearl Harbor. It was very good from a natural standpoint, but hard to defend because very many entry points into the lagoon, and they were critically aware of that when it came closer. The Americans came back. There were 2 fleets stationed in there, 2 entire fleets with 50 to 60 ships, and it was a logistical base and repair anchorage. They had 5 airstrips. They had a submarine station, they had a seaplane base, they had torpedo boat station, communication center, all kinds of things. What was crazy is at the time, there were more Japanese people there than people live in Truk as a country today. Just to put it for reference, at the time, in that, Ustin, Ueno, and Tomasa, they had 55,000 people, which now the entire country has 55,000. There were only 9,000 Trukis at the time, and now there's only Trukis. So this is what it looked like. This is a picture from after the Americans attacked it. I'll show it properly later. But what I like to show here is how much it was populated and developed. And today, that's what it looks like. Nature pretty much took it all back because the locals are not really using it. This is Tonawas, which is one of the islands the Japanese used. And the local islands are actually using Ueno more. So you can see how nature reclaimed all of this. But this is all man-made. This is all leftovers of man-made work, but there's only a couple of farmers. They don't really use it. Same with the airstrip. So this was one airstrip that was fully built, so kind of Hong Kong style. You know, you have a little island, reclaim land, build a huge airstrip. Today, that's what it looks like. It's just a weird shaped island. Yeah? There's basically one house on there. There's one guy who owns the land, and we sometimes do a lunch break over here. But it's basically not in use. So the Japanese had really developed this area much more than it's developed today, which is kind of bizarre when you think about how long that was ago. So this is the moment in time where the Americans basically flattened this area. And I need to sort of give a little bit of background. Some people don't know all the background, neither do I, but research a little bit. So in February 1944, that's when Operation Hailstone was the name of the mission to take Truk Lagoon, this big base. They wanted to make sure that that base would be taken care of. A bit of background, after Pearl Harbor, everybody knows Pearl Harbor, that's when the Japanese overstepped their mark. They thought, you know, we should show these Americans, and then the Americans said, well, okay, we can show you better. Essentially, the Americans entered the Pacific War, and they entered the European War pretty much at the same time, when they said, okay, enough is enough, kept away from both wars, and then when they attacked Pearl Harbor, they said, okay, we got to step in and show them who's who. So what they first did in 1942 is clear this area, which connected them to the Allies, to Australia and New Zealand. So that was 1942. And then from 1943, you had these two major directions to basically reclaim and bring back all the land all the way up to Japan. So these were the two forces, and I don't remember how many, but like 40 or 50 different task forces were working together to clean up this whole area. And essentially, the Japanese had woken the giant, as they said. The American Navy was way advanced than the Japanese at this stage, and it was an unstoppable force. However, if you look at the big battles, you can see here all the big battles, such as Enritok, which took 1 month, Palau took 3 months, 50,000 casualties. So several of these bases were really well defended and took a lot of time. And if you look at this map, you'll be like, well, where's Truk? Truk's not on this map. And that's because Truk was an easy operation. Even though it was the biggest Navy base, it was poorly defended, and the Japanese actually knew it. They knew they couldn't defend it. So essentially, they started pulling out their fleet already a few months before, and they were expecting that this was going to go. So that's why this was not a big battle. The Americans took 2 days to flatten the whole thing. So within 2 days, in February 1944, they basically erased the entire place, everything that there was. This was Task Force 58. I don't know, there were tons of task force. I don't know the whole thing enough, but there were 9 carriers, aircraft carriers involved. There were 7 battleships, 10 cruisers, 28 destroyers, and 10 submarines, almost 600 airplanes. Versus, this is what the Japanese had left at the stage. Mind you, a lot of these were under repair or were not properly manned. Half of the airplanes of these were not even able to take off at the time. So it was kind of a place waiting to be destroyed. It was not a real battle per se. It was a one-sided thing. Yeah? So with their whole force within 2 days, airstrikes, submarine torpedoes, surface ship action, so like cannon. There was a little bit of dogfight. I think 50 planes of the Japanese made it into the air. None of them landed naturally. But dogfights were not the essential piece of this fight, because all these battleships had pulled out. The Nagato, where Mike was just diving, the Nagato was actually in Truk Lagoon and was later captured. Mike just came back from Bikini and dove the Nagato. So they had pulled the battleships out. All the good assets were out. All the admirals were out. It was basically left for the killing. The poor Japanese lowest soldiers and Navy people were the ones left there, and they got erased. So one ship was fleeing, several ships were fleeing, only one made it out. So here you got some Hellcats and some, I forget what they're called, Grumman bombers, I think. So this is the majority of Task Force 58. Just some pictures where you can see a bomber dropping bombs on that airstrip that I showed earlier. So you can see multiple here in the air. They were giving it everything they had. Within 1 day, all the airplanes were destroyed. Here are some pictures of airstrikes. So this is a bomb that this ship looks like might have just avoided. Here you've got some machine gun action. So airplanes attacking with machine gun. Torpedo hit. Pretty impressive picture. You can see the torpedo trail and the explosion. You can see another torpedo that may or may not still hit this. So there were 10 submarines underwater. You have to imagine that, 10 submarines, and most of these ships were on anchor. So easy targets, really. Here is an example of an engine explosion after torpedo the Ikoku. Very good dive. A lot of people died on this ship. They weren't evacuated, and there was a huge sleeping area in 2 cargo holds. So hundreds of people died in there, basically sitting ducks. So the Americans didn't take much prisoners in that situation anyway. And this is what it looked afterwards. So I showed that picture earlier. So you can see they bombed this area. They bombed all these areas. You can see burning ships. This is the 6th Fleet, so that's what the San Francisco Maru and the Nippo are. So these were all basically burning. Every ship that was there was burned. They wanted to make a point. This is where Blue Lagoon, our places where we stay, right here. You can see how many ships would have sunk right in front of the place where we stay. Japanese casualties, basically the whole fleet, 70 ships plus 270 aircraft and 5,000, almost 5,000 mariners. Whereas on the US, 25 aircraft, 11 crew, and 1 destroyer had a bit of a scratch. So this was not a battle. This was a one-sided affair. But that's why we have all this stuff today. Just a couple words about Truk Lagoon. The US took over the entire Pacific as a responsibility. It was called the TTI Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. So they had these 4 states, had Palau, Mariana, Marshall, and they were taking care of this area, but it cost them a lot of money, billions of dollars, because basically it's not a productive area. Right? So there's nothing coming out of it, in. So in the 80s, they set up different groups, and for those people who've been to Palau, Palau decided not to be part of it. Palau said, we'll do our own thing, and that's why Palau is special and totally different, much better developed, because they have organized themselves much better. They were supposed to be part of the FSN. But you also have Mariana Islands and Northern Mariana Islands and Marshall Islands. They all became sort of states so that the US could push responsibility away. They're still in the compact, they call that. Yeah. If you are a Chukese, you can actually serve in the military in the US, which is what a lot of people do, because it's a great way to get American salary and American pension, American healthcare. And then once they've served, they can come back, chew betel nut, and have basically, they fly to the US to get treatment. That's what a lot of Chukese men do, because that's the best perspective. Chuk is extremely poorly developed. It's very poor. There's no real economic engine. And tourism, well, the only tourism is us. Nobody goes there for anything else but diving. And it's not much diving. There's 2,000 to 3,000 divers a year. The year record of tourists was somewhere in the 90s, was 10,000, because they had like a conference and something else. Normally 2,000 to 3,000 people a year as tourist visas. Yeah? So you can see it's a really remote place, and the only people who are there are people like us. The place where we dive, he will talk about more. They started in the 70s. The local guy started diving there in the 70s, just off the beach, and he was the guy who found all the wrecks. And actually, when you dive with Blue Lagoon, almost all the dive guides are descendants of this guy, because he had like 12 wives and 50 children, and proper island patriarch, And so a lot of the guides that we dive with are all descendants from Akimio Ayesik. And even the guy who runs the resort is the grandson of So anyway, they started this dive shop, and that's how the wreck diving came about. And today we've got 28 wrecks that are in 30 meters and shallower. Just to put this out there, people always think it's a tech location. Absolutely not a tech location. There's 28 wrecks. That's 2 weeks worth of diving, recreational depth. Right? So tons of stuff. Just last word on the kind of ships you can expect. This is the main kind of thing that we find. These are we call them, they were called Marus. So that's a merchant ship that's converted to be used in wartime. So it's actually originally a merchant cargo vessel. This is the most famous one. San Francisco, we were talking about that. Yeah, right. So the San Francisco, don't want to take it away, is a really exciting one. But this is a very good example. It would be a cargo ship that is converted to military use, but they're not heavily armed. They will have, maybe they'll have an extra layer of steel on the outside, but mostly they just have a gun in the front and the back, and that's it. So here's the gun of the San Francisco Maru. It's about 48 meters, this thing. And there's 3 tanks on there that you can see. There's water trucks on here. There's a cargo hold with mines stacked up on both sides, and sea mines lying on the floor, and torpedoes on the side. So that's the kind of stuff that you find in one cargo hold of one of these ships. The second type of ship that we get are the passenger Marus. So equally, this is a converted ship, but it's a passenger ship. So here you've got the Rio de Janeiro is one of the famous ones, and they would have been converted like this as well. Put a gun on the front and the back, painted in war colors, off you go. And that's why they were not so strong. That's why the Japanese Navy long-term couldn't really sustain, because the US had all proper Navy ships, whereas the majority of the Japanese fleet was actually this kind of thing. And you get these kind of ships. This is a 100-meter long ship that lies on its side, also in 30 meters. has like a cargo hold of wine, and because it fell to the side, it's like a wine rack. So you have a wine rack here, wall, but also very easy engine penetration, spaced out. That's a big difference to the real Navy ships. Navy ships are built much more compact, are built so that it's not easy to enter, both for ammunition or enemies or whatever. So an engine room on a Navy ship is much harder to penetrate than on a merchant ship, which is what's so nice about the Japanese wrecks in Coron, in Palau, and in Truk, that you can actually you have a lot of space in there. So if we go in there and you don't get too claustrophobic, and you can actually explore quite a bit without it getting dangerous. Then you have some destroyers, but not many. There's only one that's really easy accessible. You can already see even the bridge. It's much tighter. The engine room is super tight. So when you go in there, you need to kind of plan. It's just 1 or 2 people. You need to know how you get in and out. So it's a bit harder. There's some submarines. There's 2, but they're not really famous dives because they're just deep. You can't really get into them because, yeah, it's really tight when they were intact. So nobody really dives these much. Did you dive it?
Yes.
So won't take it away. But generally, we don't dive these much because they're hard to dive. You've got tons of airplanes lying around. A lot of them are actually in ships. So in the Shinkoku, for example, you've got quite a few zero parts, so body parts and engines just lying around. So for machine geeks, there's a lot to be said. You've got some zeros lying on the seafloor, 5 to 6 meters. You can do it on a safety. You could use like the rest of your tank to dive it, or just do it snorkeling in between dives. So you have some zeros, and then you've got the big Betty bomber. That's Simon on his first truck trip. So I put that in. That's a very, very big plane. It's really good for funny photos because pretty much this one, there's not much you can break left. So you can do lots of funny photos, explorations, play fighter. This is actually the bomber unit, so that's where the bomber would be sitting in, and stuff like that. So that's like a fun dive that you can do when you've pretty much used up all your bottom time, and you just do the 3rd dive in place. Sometimes it's a 4th dive. It's 11 meters. It's a nice little finish for the day. Yeah. So having said that, let's talk more about the diving. I'll hand over to Simon.
Excellent. Do you want to swap the? Yeah. Hopefully we can do this and keep it on the screen. Yeah, it does. So, thanks for the quite comprehensive history there, Simon. I knew Simon's got a much better talk on the history and some of how this got here. I had sort of 2 slides with a little bit of a map and an arrow on. So this is your sort of welcome to Truk. This is their sort of a big wall as you basically get off the plane, stroll across the tarmac about 15 feet with a big 737 still behind you onto the grass, and you're there. In terms of, I thought I'd throw up my sort of experience in numbers, thinking, well, who's this guy talking about this stuff from so far away? I've done 3 trips actually with Simon, first time recreationally, some of it's kind of deep, and it was time to get our technical qualifications, and so then 2 more trips diving it technically with Phil Christoph, who's sort of hosting that group, and then myself and Alan, who's on the call to see all his pictures. Stayed on another week and got a little bit off the beaten path. So I had sort of 4 weeks there, 56 dives it turns out, surprisingly 2.5 days underwater diving, 24 wrecks, about 5,000 photos, and you'll see that's still a work in progress. And 29 breakfasts, one of my favourite parts of the day. Being a sort of US protectorate, they know how to make corned beef hash as long as it's not run out, and some really nice hash browns. Yeah, that's my biggest statistic so far. We stay at Blue Lagoon, as Simon said, it's on the next slide. It's nice and down on the end. Incredibly tropical location off my balcony there. Nice, spacious rooms. It's got a nice restaurant. Actually, there are usually more locals and Mormon missionaries than there are actually divers, so don't let people in the background off. We meet. Here's Phil doing a briefing for recreational guys on a sort of dive plan and what we're going to see. I'll talk about planning a bit later. It's also got a nice bar. You can sort of wander around the garden. Pool table is quite well used, not by me, but by some of the other folks. Simon, I need to do the focus. There you go. Is this working? So Blue Lagoon, if you can see at the top of that where Wayno is, we have the airport at the top. The red dot at the bottom is where Blue Lagoon is. When I was last there in 2019, I would say the road had only made it about 2/3 of the way from the airport to Blue Lagoon. Maybe it was because it had been raining, it got a bit muddy and there was tarmac underneath it, I'm sure. It's in a great location. If you look at where all the sort of reps are marked, largely around that sort of central island and then a bit further to the south. Blue Lagoon, we dive off speedboats, maximum 6 on a boat. If there's 2 of you, like there was our 4th week, we dive with 2 of us and a guide. You get out, the furthest right down to the bottom is about 35 minutes. Most of the main wrecks around the middle are sort of 15 to 20 minutes, so it's not a long time. Here we all are on the boat at the top. This guy at the bottom, I got a great video. If you want to learn how to sort of like triangulate somewhere, you'll know it's time to get ready for diving, because the guide will get up there and grab the rope and start doing a bit, left a bit, right a bit, slow down a bit. And even though you're a long way from land, he is looking for all the buoys for the speedboats are underwater between 3 and 8 feet. So they triangulate themselves on the surface, and then he will just see the buoy and dive in, free dive down, tie the boat off with the rope, and then it's time to go diving. It's quite spectacular. Took them a little longer where we dived wrecks that hadn't been dived too often, and the algae had got on the top, and they were a bit unsure whether it was that tree or that tree, and we're talking islands hundreds of yards away that they're discussing exactly what they were supposed to be lining up on. But a great way to dive. Typical schedule. Recreational diving, the first year we did 3 dives a day, so sort of the 8 a.m. breakfast, out on the speedboat for 2 dives. Usually, as Simon said, depending where they are, but we usually surfaced intervals on that big Eton Island in the middle that's got sort of the air base. Sometimes we went to a really nice little, tiny little island, like 10 times the size of this room. 2 baby sharks swimming around it, like 8 inches of water, it was pretty cool. Then back for lunch and then dive 3. Technical, we only did 2 dives a day. Get up early, a lot of work with the tanks, I'll show you later. Join everybody for breakfast, but then dive 1, dive 2, get back a bit earlier for lunch, and then nice relaxing dinner and a few beers and a game of pool. In terms of the schedule, that's come out a little small, but what's highlighting here, in red, are what I call, what Simon talked about, sort of the absolute signature reps you must do. The greens are kind of you must do, but you're not so bound to when you do them. And the first week, and you look at the first dive of the day, there is a fairly well-trodden progression in depth, and also in those wrecks there's a bit of a progression in terms of penetration and your comfort with, I'll call it later, around the corner. There's a lot of stuff in sort of open ascent, but then you start getting into sort of going into the other areas. And so the first year we did find, when we turned up at sites, some of the liverboards would also be there. Now you don't normally get 2 boats when divers in the water together, but you did find occasionally you were the second group to dive, because the liverboard had put, and actually more numbers on the dive site. And if somebody's been in a smaller space, that silt is there to the up and in piece. So when we did it the second year, and having been sort of technical divers helped, A, we had experience of the wrecks, B, we had more capability. We just front loaded, and you see we did all those signature dives the day before, and we didn't even see a little board. I'm talking actually see it, not even just it's on another side. They were usually on different parts, following largely that first batch. The second week we did technically, we did the same thing. You see we still got the green ones, but we also got into a bit of exploration mode and did some of the other deeper wrecks that aren't really on the first tour. And there's some amazing stuff on it. So there is a massive benefit, and particularly to being land-based and knowing that first week schedule, that even recreationally, Simon and Phil and the groups mixed up the recreation a little bit to try and avoid this problem. In some places I'll show you later, there are, if somebody's been in there an hour or 2 behind you, you're not going to get any photos. It's really maxed out. So if you look, a lot of those dives are deep. There's quite a lot between 28 and 30, but then there are some really amazing wrecks between 30 and 40 and even further. I mean, a key point, Blue Lagoon provide guides for every dive, which I think is essential. There are boats that definitely heard evidence, what I know from first-hand experience, people who have not had that. I think they're being short-sold because, I think if you're tempted into penetrating in some of these wrecks on your own, it can be pretty dangerous. There are some spots to get these are not sanitized, made for divers wrecks. And also, you're just not getting to see the best parts. But that said, the guides will not be checking your air, checking your NDLs. They will run a plan. You need to be confident diving with your buddy and just keep an eye on your own set. So knowing your dive computer, definitely sort of knowing how to set the nitrox and getting your settings correct. Because if you do any of the sort of 35-meter dives, you're going to be doing it on there. You've still got yourself set for nitrox and something can be down there 20 minutes because it's on nitrox, but you're actually on air. You kind of got a bit of a problem in your computer, doesn't matter get stuff up. So good buddy checking these things, making sure you know your setting, keeping an eye on NDL limits. You look at sort of 39, 42 meters off my Sonto, you're getting pretty short of time. And if for any reason you do get kind of held up getting up, you need to really know what your emergency decode on your computer is going to say. That's what you require to get up. And this is deciding with your buddy what your objectives. You don't need to be doing this dive, but if you are going into that 35 to 40 meter range, you need to be keeping an eye on yourself. And if you have redundant gas, even as a recreational diver, side mounts a great solution. And one of the other things I think is key is being comfortable. There's two things really: the kind of wreck penetration, people getting themselves into spaces they may feel more enclosed than they have done in any other sort of just reef diving. The second thing is the narcosis. For me, I definitely get anxiety with it, and I think that's a kind of fairly common trait with it. So being aware of those, don't be pushing yourself, be comfortable all the time. I mean, the wreck penetration, building up the experience, recognizing if you don't feel comfortable and turning around. The safest thing to do is grab your buddy in. I've done that a couple of times, partly due to narcosis and overworking deep. And then the narcosis, you can sort of get your comfort level up. I think it's really important to recognize you may be comfortable and more used to it, but you are not increasing your performance. I did make a mistake I just talked about earlier and got to 50 meters with a PPO2 warning and was like, that shouldn't be happening. Then I'm trying to change the gas on my computer. It took about 1.5 minutes. But because I fudged through menus and didn't get it done where it's on the surface, it's a 20-second exercise. So this is what I call the kind of spacious. You can see all of these, there's Seth coming out of a cargo hold. There's a lot of stuff in the cargo hold, so you're always within a open ascent to the surface. As you'll see, he quite likes to pose underwater, so he's sort of doing a Superman out of there for me. And this in the middle at the bottom is that's a bulldozer in a cargo hold. Again, you can see the blue light from the top. The other type of penetrations are where the ships are on the side. You can come in the cargo holds from the side, and so there's the shells on the Yamagiri Simon already showed. But we've got plenty of access just straight out. We can see where the light is, and then on that's also the Yamagiri at the bottom. That I think is a bomb hole, which is why it's not square, but there's a lot of visible light, and where I am quite a way back, I still see a clear exit. It's not going to get sorted out. And then sort of the spacious, but a little less. This is a big engine room on the Kensho. That's our guide hanging out over a bridge. That's quite a big space, a bit smaller than this room. But it's got skylights. It's very well lit. You're always going to be able to see daylight. It's pretty clear where the way out is, and those skylights are quite large. So this is kind of quite comfortable, and usually the first step of penetration. Some people don't even like this feeling enclosed, and that's fine. There's plenty to see outside. Don't be pushing it. This is now what I call the kind of getting cozy, or round the corner. So in a lot of those areas where you've got direct light on you or coming at you, you can usually just, for example, if you imagine a cargo hold, it's got a big hole where the cargo comes in, but then it's got flat decks on the side where they actually put the stuff. That is actually covered by a deck. And some of these are like 3 level deep, so you can go 3 levels down but you're still going in a open ascent shaft, but then you're just going round the corner, so you're not directly light above you. And this sort of slide with the trucks, this is taken from largely where that bulldozer is on the last slide. As you come in, but you start looking, these trucks are pushed in against the wall. And you can, if you can see the diver there, he's just about to go around the front of it. So he's still not very far, probably 10 meters or less from that totally open cargo hold, but you're starting to get into a bit more of space. And it's a bit tighter along the front of those trucks. These two, this top one on the right, that's our guide in the Rio de Janeiro. Again, you sort of come in the torpedo hole, and then you have to kind of sort of turn back on yourself, and you don't really see the light, but you're in a very big space. It's on its side, so it can be disorientating. But yeah, you're sort of round the corner, so to speak. And this is a little bit further in there at the bottom right. This is Alan and the guide and me tucked in the corner, where you sort of swing, turn around, and come back out. The entrance is just around the corner. Where that is, everything's dark. So I think you really want to be progressive and watch your comfort levels with these type of things. If you're not comfortable, grab your buddy, turn around and go out. Because often the guides, particularly if you're towards the back, even with 4, the guide will be at the front. You don't signal him. You need to be confident, buddy diving with your team, and you say to your buddy, we're going. I can see the exit, we're out. You know, out to the set. I mean, disorientation is interesting. These wrecks are like on their sides. You see the stairs going sort of left to right there. That can be confusing. You want to pay attention to how you came in and where you think you might be getting out. And a key thing, wreck penetration is not competitive sport. If you see people trying to dive to stick their head under something or getting involved with trying to find themselves what's in the tightest spot possible, you do not want to be diving with those type of guys. And again, why having a good buddy, you know what they're sort of like underwater, and a sensible head, and diving in a group of like-minded people is a major point for me. And then you get into what I call getting tight, and this is a good example. If you look on the far left there, this is the Kensho that's very in touch. This is the Shinkoku, which is very similar, but a torpedo went into the bottom of the engine room. So this is a bit of a mangled mess as you kind of come in through the hole. And once you turn the corner, it doesn't quite look tight, but there's a huge amount of like wires, bars, rubber on the bottom, and you kind of have to swim over it. And if you see the tanks in the stop, that's Mimi about to go up and over and come back in the corridor floor above, up the stairs. There, like I'll talk through the slides and mention my points. Further up, this is the machine room. You see Seth's fins. He's kind of inside mount. He's having to get on his side. The boat's on an angle. There's not much space between the ceiling and the sill. That's getting a bit tight. Mimi on the top here. That's again going through a quite tight door to get in a corridor, which is the door is that size. Not for the small door salesman. The corridor is that size as well. And an example of the bottom two slides on the right. This is quite open space in the Kensho, one of my favourite dives, and the engine room there. That's where that bridge is. That's a big room where I'm taking the picture, but you can see Phil in side mount about to disappear down the stairs into the lower engine room, and that is a tight, single file, very silty space. And that's Alan. The kitchen again is reasonably wide, but once you get through that door and the corridor, it's a bit tight. The key thing with this, buoyancy is essential. Obviously, you can get silt up and really make things difficult. This is kind of single file diving, so self-carried redundant air source. You're not really going to turn around quite everybody get on the octopus. So I think for getting into these tighter spots, wreck training, I mean sort of advanced wreck training is definitely beneficial. Things like lost line, trying to locate things in silt outs, running lines, and understanding where you are and what your search patterns are. But technical training skills, particularly having the redundancy side mount or doubles, but also long hose air sharing where you can share air comfortably through the single file to navigate, say, out of one of these goggles if you have a really catastrophic event, and also things like touch signals, so that if you're behind the guy, you can signal move forward, stop, no problem, etc. How do I do that? Is it on the keyboard? I think having a plan is quite an essential thing, again, with sort of the buddies and the team. I mean, I've put sort of like dive objectives. What are you trying to see? These recs are way too big to try and see everything. Trying to see half of it is usually a bit of an exercise. Things like order and execution, particularly in the tight spot, who's going in first, if somebody's planning to take a photo, what could everybody hang back whilst that goes on. And then I sort of say the buddy team plan, group plan, and the guides plan. I mean, things on the dive objectives, if you look at Alan on the left there by the bridge, that's a nice bridge over the engine room. I said to the group, there was 4 of us, I said, can everybody stop when we get to the bridge? I'd like to get a really nice photo of everybody hanging out there, and I think it looked pretty cool. Unfortunately, I was expecting what we saw on the left. They were expecting what's on the right and the bridge of the ship with the steering wheel and everything, and so they were just like sort of swam past and it was, what the hell's going on? And then in terms of the guys, particularly with the deeper dives, recreationally they will stay with you and run limited, well, they'll sort of show you the highlights, some penetration, and then shall you up on the dive. When we were doing the deeper dives, they will not dive the same equipment, they will guide you through incredible stuff and plan and do all the penetration you want to do. But then typically after that, this is usually where they sort of, you start seeing them drifting off. And they know where the lines are, even at 30 meters, when this is sort of like a 40 meter bottom. We typically navigate back on the wreck, you'll just see them start floating up, and then when they catch your attention, they'll be like, see you later. You're on your own, or they'll usually say sort of something like the bows that way, or the sort of lines that way, and as long as you're okay, they're off. So typically, do the penetration, get guided by them, and then they will move on. And that's the technical. With recreation, not very much. Stay with you the whole way. Just a little bit on the technical diving, what we did a sort of total time to surface. Anybody's interested, I can talk later. But typically we sort of planned 30 minutes at 50 meters, which gives you about 45 minutes of decompression stops to come back up. You look at how much gas is required to do that, and so then even if you're not spending the time at 50, you're maybe doing some 55, some shallower, or you're spending it all at 45 meters. That 45 minutes time to surface is our absolute max, and we know we've got the capacity, ample reserves, and redundancy to do that and to decompression. And to do that, everybody was in side mount or doubles, always a nitrox 80 for the accelerated decompression, and on the 50 meters we took a nitrox 30 for extra redundancy to try to keep the time down there. And we did usually hang an 80 nitrox 80 from the boat, which was what was left from the previous dives. Once you get under a certain pressure, it's not really redundant enough for 2 divers to take down on the dive, so we take the full one down, get back to the boat, and breathe down the remnants of what we've used in the last couple of dives. The nitrox is relatively expensive, and it just gets a little tricky. But so 5 regulators is kind of the key if you're going to be trying to do these plans. The technical diving, yeah, it's quite a lot of things. Gas management, spent a huge amount of time analysing gas, working out what would happen if I stick the nitrox 30 on top of half a tank of nitrox 80, etc., etc. Very bizarre, the internet will degree differently, but we spent a lot of time doing this. When we get the tanks from the guy freshly partial blended 80%, you analyse them and they'd be at like 45%. You're like, what's going on? And he would put it on the table, roll it, be 60, control it a bit more, and be like 70. Then you'd come back the next day, it'd be about 75, and you do a bit more of this, and eventually it's 80. I mean, at the price they charge for oxygen, one thing I can guarantee is we did not have too much oxygen. But so yeah, we spent a lot of time swapping tanks, rolling them, analysing them. There's quite a lot of gear, the 50 meter dives, side mount or doubles, that's Nikita in side mount with 2 80-litre deco bottles, that's Alan down at the twin tanks on the San Francisco in the same gear. And then a lot of hanging around, 40 minutes, 45 minutes in the blue, just going up the line, largely it's 6 meters under the boat. That's not looking great deco style, but typically because we can't have raw, nobody messing around with cameras, swimming about on the deco stops for real. This was the last dive of the week, the second week we were there. We paid so much for this O2, we might as well suck down as much as we can, so we spent another 20, 30 minutes. There were so many batfish swimming around us, and it just got cool. And as you can see, Phil, the guide, he's kind of just like strapping all his side mount tacks off the line, ready to go up. You can see by Seth's side mount tanks that they're pretty empty. Yeah, fun. tip on, like, the guides do their own thing. This is kind of local style, 50-meter dive down here. He's got a 80 on his back, and I think that's an 80 of 50%. Amazing divers. The amount of air they don't use is incredible. They'll do a 50-meter dive, 15 minutes, and still have 140 part air in the back. But they will show you around, and then they will head up on these deep dives. And yeah, this is for your guides only. Don't be just getting yourself a paddle bottle for meters. So just an idea of like things you can see. This is kind of diving the Nippo recreationally, and these are actually, particularly the top tier artifacts. They're probably the best photos I've got came from doing it that way. But I'll show you a picture of the boat. But largely, you kind of descend. This is sort of depth at about 30 meters, so you kind of get met by some sort of like nice artillery guns. There are actually two sort of Lorenz trucks in the back there. Once you've sort of had your fill photographing those, you sort of swim back over the boat, come through. There's this amazing tank. This one doesn't have its gun on it. It was taken off and stowed whilst it was on the deck, but that was where it was shipped from Japan, waiting to be delivered. There is also a cargo hold with some sort of like gas mask, ammunition, quite a lot of things. And then this amazing bridge. So this is the other side of my buddy at the time taking the photo that Simon showed you earlier. You can see the sort of wooden floor. Again, a bit of discipline, take it in one at a time, so he went into these photos. And actually, whilst I was hanging out outside, one of the things that is often not mentioned is the wildlife is blue. There are fish actually all over these wrecks. You can see sharks, turtle and things. But this was just this massive group of snappers, trevallies, whatever, just came flying through the bridge. And I grabbed a few of them, but there were like hundreds and they were actually going through the door at the back of the bridge and out the window. I just managed to turn my camera and grab that. Doing it as a technical dive, sort of see the same things, but we get less time on them. But you can do, so this is what I think one of my signature dives. You can actually go off the edge of the boat, and where Phil's feet are dipping into in the sort of top left there, that's the sort of the torpedo remnants. It sort of blew the side back and created a hole. When you come in this sort of top right, you've got this completely immaculate engine room. There's still kind of like corals and things and shovels lying about on the floor. You can sort of see the steps and the pipe work and things there. And then you sort of circle around that. It's about 3 stories high, the skylights. And not the greatest photos, but trying to give you an idea of, it's like sort of you kind of spend 5 minutes swimming around the thing, working your way up, and then you can see the top walkway. You can see the skylight at the top left of that picture, and then Phil is disappearing into the corridor. And then this bottom photo, again, pretty crap photo, but just to give everybody an idea, I like to snap pictures of the where I am, if nothing else, when I dive again. But you sort of go down this corridor now, sort of all the length of the superstructure. But this gives a pretty much correct angle of what the boat is. So it's quite steep. You can also see the sill sitting there at the bottom. Then we went to see the tank, but then we kind of came in, and it's very interesting. We came in a level below. Normally you swim through the windows of the bridge. The guide took us back into the superstructure, and we sort of worked our way around. And then the Keter is coming up where there used to be wooden steps up to the bridge. Why they're not still there? Like floorboards. But I'm waiting whilst her and Seth kind of went in there. And again, this is kind of just like a team discipline, so you don't get 4 divers in what is relatively sort of small space. So I've got my head poked out of the hole where she's swimming up, grabbing these shots of them coming through, and then I moved in to take another picture. This is probably the most photographed steering wheel in Truk Lagoon, if not the world, as they're exiting. Amazing wreck. Give you an idea on that. I'm going to stand over here, maybe off the photos, but you come down the mooring lines normally here. Here's the guns. Recreationally, you sort of swim sort of along or up over here or through this in and out of this. Then come down, look at the truck, look at the hold, then make your way up and swim in through the bridge and out. Then you've got to come back usually up to the mooring line here. For the engine, you basically swim across this, but you've not got much time, so you don't get time to hang around with all this stuff. You're off the side and in that hole, and then you spend time working up underneath the engine room here, then swimming a long time along this corridor, and you traverse a bit, and you actually come out of that hold, pop up at the tank, but then he kind of took us up back in there, in and up. If I move forward, you sort of see the dive plans, and it's definitely, it's a 35-minute dive recreationally, but if you look, this is looking at the guns, looking at the tank, working the way up that superstructure and in the bridge, then swimming along the back, then coming and working way up the line. This is not deco stops, this is running my Sunto deep stops. But so you've kind of had almost 20 minutes before you leave the wreck. With our little tech exploration, we only got 15 minutes more, but then ended up doing sort of 27 minutes of deco. And if you look where this is largely the penetration up to here, then we popped up, saw the tank, swam up that top bit, went back in, and then this is the bridge. We actually sort of flew by, though we kind of didn't see the guns and the trucks on the back at all. We flew by the tank, flew by the bridge to an extent. So it's a bit sort of horses for courses. You can see it, you decide what you want on each dive. There is a huge amount to see in recreational diving, and some of this is a bit of a different exercise, but you're not going to see it all in one dive by any sense of way. This is the Hokey, another super famous wreck. It's got all these trucks and things in it. Again, this is probably the limit of recreational. This is sort of a 40-meter to get down and see these trucks, so you are limited on time. This is a fascinating ship because this was actually a British-built ship sold to the Kiwis, and then was actually captured by the Amagasan, which is another wreck. I'll show you a gun that probably fired on this and captured it. Because although Simon mentioned they were Maroos, they were carrying cargo and support vessels. They did with some of them, and the faster moving ones, and the ones they stuck bigger guns on, create a class of what they called merchant raiders, which if they came across enemy merchant ships, they would attempt to capture them. And the Hokey was a New Zealand allied merchant ship that was captured by the Amagasan and put into action by the Japanese and then sunk in Truk Lagoon. So here you sort of head down where everybody is. This is the entrance to the cargo hold at the top left. You drop down in there at the first level. You see it's quite wide open. That is the bulldozer. If you note, that's actually horizontal and got a front on it. That unfortunately now has dropped down vertically and gone down a level, and the front's come off. So at 70 plus years old, things are deteriorating. You can also see on the left there's a steamroller. I'm not sure I've got a picture of Alan posing with that later on in the presentation. So that's kind of the first level deck, and then you kind of poke your head under that, and there's this row of trucks. There's about 4 on one side and there's 4 on the other. Typically, recreationally, you want to keep an eye on the 40-meter limit and come and have a look at these trucks, maybe quickly swim around in front of them, try and get a couple of photos. I actually love this photo. It's kind of not the best, but it's a sort of great demonstration. The guy in front was super cool on his buoyancy, but even a front kick, just a little bit, he kind of let his feet drop. Even a little gentle front kick, suddenly the kind of silk comes at you. And I just happened to get a snap and get the front of that truck at the time that the cloud's coming in. What I call the Hokey, the extended tour. I mean, the first couple of times we did it technically, it's so cool with all those trucks. All we did is spend just more time with the trucks. When me and Alan stayed the extra week, I think we'd already done it twice. We sort of had a look at the book, which is something I advocate, get a book. This boat was built in 1920. It's one of the last boats that had what's called a fantail, which is where the propeller is often quite ahead of the actual rear of the boat. Titanic is a fantail, so if you think of that type of shape. And it's an amazing, I mean, that's kind of 50 meters on the sand there, and unfortunately my photo is diabolical. Natural light, wide angle, trying to get a boat that's about 20 meters high was a complete disaster. There are 2 propellers there, the rudders in place, and the fantails up above us is pretty amazing. And actually, from when we went recreationally, the guide it was a bit easier to see down below, and he kind of poked our heads down until we told him it was like 41 meters and we weren't going down there. But you can see there's a torpedo hole on the side. So when the guide was happy to take us to the back, rather than showing up to 30 meters on the deck, I said, can we swim on the side and go in the torpedo hole? Yeah, if you suggest it, and he's happy with it, that's exactly what we did. So we swam along the side of the boat quite quickly, shallowed up to about, I think it's about 43 meters. Swam in the torpedo holes. It's completely full of what were aviation fuel barrels, which have fortunately stopped leaking. This wreck was known for years for unimportant fuel smell. And then you actually come up underneath that's the same caterpillar that I was talking about, the bulldozer. That's now sort of sitting on the bottom at the 3rd hold where the barrels are, whereas it was on the beams sort of at the 1st level. And then we went the other side. So you could, where the trucks I showed you the front, you could take pictures of them. This is the other side, which I haven't seen in 4 or 5 dives on these wrecks, where the trucks are actually passed up against the wall. So it's quite, they're in slightly better condition with headlamps and things, but it's tight. You can see Alan's here swimming between the bonnets and the ceiling with bubbles. Just to give you an idea, you sort of come down the line, it's just to the left of the first cargo hold. Then the ones with the beams are, you just sort of go on then and just sort of swim around with the cargo decks. We obviously drop down where the propellers are. That's not a great picture of the representation of the back. Not sort of Titanic S. And it's missing the torpedo hole kind of about here, which is halfway down by the trucks. There is a big difference on the plans here, doing it recreationally. Again, we kind of had that, we thought we were going up, and the guy decided to stick his head where the torpedo hole was, so we ended up staying about 12 minutes, and then we were sort of willing to get up, and we had to trip over our 8-minute NDL, so we were sort of following our watches there, which is not great, so you do need to be on top of your guide. If we just followed our guide blindly, we could have been ticking away even more. But that you can do at 40 meters, see all the trucks, 39 meters, like if it's low tide, probably 38, 37, you can spend more time in there. And then technically, yeah, it's a bit more so what we did 35-minute bottom time, so that's where having the extra swim actually makes a difference, but yeah, 45 minutes. I'll decode that. Done with dive plans and things, but yeah, the San Francisco, I don't know, Nippo, Hoki, San Francisco, it's hard to say what's the favourite. Probably done each of them 4 times, maybe 5. The San Francisco, you kind of come down onto the superstructure at about 45 meters, then you kind of dip straight into the sort of a funny kind of side hole, which has got this amazing, it's a sort of staff car, I don't know what model it is. But then you sort of swim through the hole, and if you come up, the hole is completely lined with walls. These are anti-personnel mines sort of designed on the beach to explode out in all directions. Then there's the tank, there's Alan by the tank on the deck. This one's actually got its gun on it, and you can sort of tell the difference. For some reason they shipped this one with the barrel screwed in. And then finally up to the front, the gun is quite big on the San Francisco. I think that's one of the ones that was a merchant raider, so they kind of armed it reasonably. And then you're heading up, and you're kind of sort of 45-minute deco. So again, just come into the map. Apologies for the people on Zoom, but you sort of drop in here, and under here, once you get into this bit, is where the car is. Then you come through. This is where all the sort of mines. There's a lot of shells and ammunition the other side. We sort of swam forward, took pictures of the gun, then came back to the tank. We've done that dive a couple of times at those type of depths, and so much to see. You run out of time. Actually, getting over this side, there's 2 tanks on top of each other that we saw earlier with Alan and his gear. We did that second dive, and to mix things up, when we stayed the extra week, we went in actually through the skylights here into the top of the engine room, which actually the engine room is very tight once you see the top of the engines. The guide was like, well, look at the top. You could see a lot of the machinery and stuff around it, but then we sort of swam to the front of the engines and came through, and I think we came out of these sort of holds, so we sort of moved forward. Then the guide left us and hopped up the line, and we came and saw the double tanks and hung around these bits again. Other favourites, I mean, Fujikawa, Simon talked about, that's completely full of these planes, Japanese Zeros, spare parts, engines, rudder blades. You can just sort of see the cockpit, you can see the seat in there, there's still rudder pedals, there's the control stick, pilot, correctly what you call that out. A yoke is there. It's got a great big gun on the front. I mean, this is one of these, another sort of amazing piece of the history. You see Alan here. There's a little piece of brass that they keep polished. That's actually got the sort of serial and makers mark of the gun. It was actually a British gun sent to the Japanese for the Sino-Russo conflict. It was built in 1899 in the UK. It's a 6-inch breech loader. It's got 6BL written on the back. And come Second World War, and they were sort of, Simon mentioned, they were struggling to arm up. They were sort of pulling out everything they could to stick on these boats. And then again, the Kensho, to give you an idea, this is where Phil was disappearing around the stairs. Nikita's here sort of swimming along the top of the engines in a big, quite open space. Phil was going down those steps, and this is what is directly below those engines. It's covered above, but you've got every cylinder's got these like oiling gauges, which are sort of the glass tubes. It's sort of like what the oil at each of the places it squirts it into each cylinder, and there's a whole electrical control panel with the switches still on it. There's a a repaired bench with a vice and spanners still hanging on the wall. Just absolutely like you could literally, if the water wasn't there, you could take the things off and you could walk around and sort of do some handwork. And another thing I mentioned, the wildlife. I mean, it is amazing. This was just it's rarely when you're planning to take pictures inside a wreck, it's rare you're ready to snap whatever comes by outside the wreck. This was just an amazing set of snappers by that gun where Alan was. Fortunately, I was taking that picture of him and I could get them. A somewhat poor demonstration, but attempting to show these boats are absolutely covered with coral. Like there's just so much colour, even as you get deeper and sort of shine the torchlight. And here down at the bottom, the strobe has managed to light up. This is another example of how, how desperate the Japanese were to arm themselves up. This is a First World War era wooden wheeled field gun. Unfortunately, there are so many glassfish we could not get rid of. You can't really make it out, but this is a wheel. So this is like a sort of like horse and cart wagon wheel with a sort of pre-First World War, I think, gun on it that they stuck on the front of this boat just in case. This is the Seiko. And other things, I mean, we saw dolphins come past. The only dolphin I've ever seen underwater was on a deco stop, like that was a 5-second experience. Lots of sharks on the wreck, big rays, eagle rays swimming past you, just not in a position to photograph them. And then, if you just never stop seeing things. This was the 4th week when we deliberately tried to go and find some different wrecks. This unbelievably intact. You can see this is the Shotan. You can see that the rear gun is actually what they call the sort of like the docking bridge. That's actually a sort of wheel to steer the ship on the very back. It's again still got its frame of the steering wheel minus the wooden spokes. It's also one of the very few boats. This is an intact. This is a funnel. The big cloud around it is glassfish again, but because they were just sort of sheet aluminium or steel, they literally rotted or fell over. So very rare. There's only a couple of boats that have actually still got the chimney or the funnel smokestack for Joe Americans. This is the truck that's in a wreck called the Nagano. This is quite deep. That's about 56 meters, kind of our limit on air. But it's on. But this you can see there's still glass in the light. There's glass in every window. Still got a wing mirror there on both sides with glass in it. It's like literally untouched. I'm not sure where the other lights on. I think it's probably still down on much sand with it. And then even the wrecks we have dived. These gauges are from the Yunkai. That's a quite nice wreck, very picturesque, bits and pieces in the hold. But the reason they don't take you in the engine room, it's super tight. It's kind of 2 divers in there at most. So the guide was like, and then we went. But again, this is one of the oldest ships made in the UK, Newcastle, in 1905. It's actually a triple expansion steam engine, so you can sort of see the 3 different sizes of piston and the crank on the bottom. And you can just see, I think it's 3 and 4 Duke Street, the Liverpool, which is the Cartelli brothers who made these instruments, still written on the gauge, and very beautiful to get a look at the history of some of these ships. And then, so this is largely me. I'll give you my sort of camera tips. Simon's got a lot of gear, as we obviously expect from a kind of pro photographer, Truk Lagoon, the instructor, teacher, but I've been sort of working along with my Sony RX100 Mark IV. What happened there? Single strobe. Navigating big gear in some of these tight spaces is not going to be easy, but we'll see how I get on with my Sony A7 Mark II this year. Next visit. It does take time. Wide angle is definitely not easy, and red, dark, deep, totally different settings. If your pressure's around his glass, do not take it. You think you're going to be careful, but the moment the guide goes round the corner and you suddenly find pipes everywhere, you are going to scratch it. I kind of got over trying to not scratch my dome on like literally 10 minutes into the first dive. And I did many times. Amazingly, it hasn't affected the pictures. And enjoy the experience first. You will take an inordinate amount of really bad photos. You've only seen like 100 out of 5,000. I'd have to go through the whole 5,000. But see it first, enjoy it. It's pretty special, it's pretty amazing. It's great. Like I say, there's always next year. I spent 4 weeks there and looking to go again. Final thoughts, go soon. They are over 70 years old and they're right with personal experience. There's a wreck where the superstructure was kind of collapsed and there used to be a nice bathroom you could see in there. It's now down. I showed you earlier the bulldozer that's kind of slid down and the beams are broken, bits come off the front. Buy a book. That, if you want to know the history of the wrecks, also provide ideas. You can talk about the guide. Can you show me this? Can you get here? Some of the places they talk about you can't get anymore, but you've got an idea of what might interest you. Go in a group, know who you're diving with, as I kind of alluded to, having a good solid buddy, matching skills, matching objectives. You don't want to be the buddy with the guy who wants to go into the dark corner and you want to hang out on the top. So I've done it 3 times with Simon and then stayed on an extra week with Alan, just the 2 of us, but I've known I'm diving with Simon, Phil. I've quite a tight plan and kind of matching people with ability, objectives, and the guys on the tech route, we've sort of largely been the same group both years, which has been really good. Go land-based, as I mentioned, being able to mix the order on a speedboat, decide what you want to do at the last minute. If you're kind of on a liveaboard with recreational divers, whatever your dive plan is, you're not going to be able to do 50-meter dives every morning because they're not going to be able to take for recreation. They need to get on different buoys. They usually have to move sometimes on the tender to get people to the small boat buoys to descend. Often they can swing the back and be over it, but you just get the flexibility to be able to plan when you're sort of land-based. You also get the comfort, chilling out in the restaurant, chilling out playing pool. I don't see, much as liveaboards are great and a lot of fun, I don't see the benefits here. Blue Lagoon really put on a good show, and you get flexibility and a guide every dive. I've heard a lot of people not saying that. And go again. I've done it 3 times. You can't see half of it even 3 times, and get the photos you missed last time. It's still work in progress. So now, just to finish up, I thought I'd have a little bit of fun, teach you some of the Truk Lagoon, know what you're looking at, or know where the guide's pointing you. And towards the end, I think I might throw a few beers on the table for anybody who can get these. Am I on the video? Okay, so both can see, you can play at home. So, hand signals. I'm going to get my sheet out actually, make sure I do these in the right order. Just in case there's an embarrassing miss. So, the first one should be relatively straightforward. You know, it's what I'm doing that. Yes, well done, Kath.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't win a beer.
Everybody see that at home? And so, it can be truck, car, anything drivable. Also often the boat. So you'll find that a lot of these signals, even if the guide, like if he's pointing out it's obvious, but he will sort of say like, the bridge, he's meaning the bridge is that way. And if the line is tied to the bridge, he will give that signal. Or that, you're going to find something you can drive down in the hold. That's that truck down on the Garno, Alan having a good look at the cab on the Hoki. That's a tanker that fell off the Amagisan. Because it's on its side, a lot of the stuff that's on it is now sitting on the bottom. And that Amagisan, I put that in there because that's actually the boat that captured the Hoki, which is the boat that I was looking through the window on. And that is the Futagami, which is a bridge that is not the Nippo. You see a lot of pictures of the Nippo, so I dug that out especially. And that actually, one of the submarines, we did dive it, I'll briefly mention it. It is just a tube. Conning tower's kind of sort of falling down. It's not really part of the pressure hull, so it's a kind of tube. And a lot of the back has gone because even the Japanese depth charged it after it got bombed and sunk. This boat, Futagami, a tug, came along with a huge amount of pipes in that. They tried to pump it out and get it back up, and then when that wasn't working and they had to flee, they depth charged it to make sure the Americans wouldn't capture it, they had to pump it out, bring it up. And then that got sunk and through just around the corner about 50 yards away. So, number 2, this is in the easy category. So, some people might know this, we actually use this in Hong Kong recently.
Explosion.
Explosion. Yes, bomb, explosion, anything that's going to go bang. So, yes, we've got the 16-inch shells on the Yamagiri, the mines. These are torpedoes on the Hayam Maru, that big passenger ship Simon showed us. That was a submarine tender, so it's got periscopes and all sorts of submarine related. And that at the end, the only photo I sort of got of any somewhat reasonable quality, that is Simon on the first trip. And the Gosai is a great dive, great recreational dive, and spend a good hour on that. Goes from 5 meters to 35 meters, but it was sunk by sort of big torpedo bombs, and that's one that kind of sits about. So that one obviously missed and is still sitting on the sand about 20 meters away from one that hit, where there's a massive torpedo hole in the bottom of it that you typically go down and see that expensive torpedo hole and work your way down. Number 3, now we're getting interesting. We're going into the intermediate zone. Oh, yeah, I'll change the order. But what do you think this is?
Gun. Gun.
Gun. Kath's in. Well, Kath could be winning this. Oh, I forgot. You've just been away. You're
Cheating. Cheating.
No, it's not
Yes.
cheating, right?
Yes, having just been wet diving.
like some hyper.
It must be gun, right?
Okay, Kath, you're banned now. Yes, that is any usually large, big gun, ship's gun. So this is that's the back of the Yunkai. I was quite proud of that. And actually, you can see some of the coral colour and fish swimming around. This one on the top right, this is the Magasan that captured the Hoki. So they were probably busy firing that gun at the Hoki when it was in New Zealand. The one on the bottom left is actually a bit. These are both the Fujikawa, but typically when you dive it the first day, you always go forward, seal the plane, seal the cool stuff, and you go to the front, and that's Allen button at the front. Having the opportunity to kind of mix it up a bit, we dived something very specific and wanted to see a machine shot, we went to the back. And there's a lot of stuff at the back, so that is actually the gun at the back of the Fujikawa, which is considerably left photographed. So now, we're still on intermediate. So here's the next one. Look, Kath is not allowed to answer. So this is this one.
Yeah.
Yes, well done, Adrian. Usually the boat propeller, obviously when it's there, it's quite easy to see what it is. It is, again, usually the guide is, if the front of the boat is blown away and the lines at the back or something, he'll kind of give you the propellers, which direction it is. Sometimes this is actually, again, the Fujikawa coming up again. There are quite a few wrecks, like in the sort of rear forecastle deck. It's kind of sort of raised and got a cover, but you've usually got the ship's steering gear there. That's a sort of spare propeller blade, so usually they'll point out spare propeller blades as people are wondering what would be good to make this. How you get it from there onto the thing, I never did find out. So now we're going advanced. Kath is banned. I might actually, I'll throw in a beer here and not for Kath. Anybody know that one?
Yes.
What? Ladders? Engine. Kath is leading a cheap operation. So yes, that is engines, supposed to sort of signify the pistons. Like this, set hanging out. Some of these are big, these engines. That's the Yamagiri. Some of them on their side, that's hanging around in the Rio. Nikita about to go. I didn't realise I had these in twice, but yeah, that's Nikita sort of hanging out by the engines on the Kensho. So now this is related. There's definitely a beer for this. No.
Telegraph.
Andy, a beer for Andy. Yes, that is the ship's telegraph. So you find these on the bridge, but also so that's on the bridge. I think that is the Nippo, the wooden form. Down at the bottom here, Phil is busy sort of taking close-ups of the Shinkoku, where the bridge is kind of collapsed, but that is the bridge telegraph. This one is the Yunkai. It's actually on the back. As I mentioned, a lot of these ships, like Titanic, they actually have what they call the docking bridge. So they would have the ability to steer the ship and control the engines from the back. So they come in either back first or front first. They have capabilities to maneuver the ship, and largely it's related to the first. They set what power they want and on which engine to signal down to the engine rooms. And so now we've got only one more left, and this is absolute pro level for a beer.
Dead zone.
Do that again. A bridge. No. No. I think this one is going to be a tough one. This is the R2D2 machine shop compressor on the Fujikawa. Seth on his birthday things have changed. This, you used to be able to put your head in the door and take that picture, maybe without the guy wearing sunglasses at 27 meters. It's a bit off the beaten track now because it's collapsed. You can't get in the door. You have to go through a pretty tight machinery with lathes and grinders and all sorts of things. And this was the air compressor that ran all the tools and the machinery, and there's the R2D2. So Seth, for his birthday, was desperate to see this, and he wanted a photo, so an incredibly carefully planned exercise to get that shot. It's a bit of a trade secret, so anybody wants, I'm not going to mention it on the presentation, that's the end of me, but anybody wants to buy me a beer, I'll give you a rundown.
We'll wrap up, let's do one more minute and then we'll do questions.
Do they have decompression chamber in Truk Lagoon?
Yes.
Can we keep the question for after?
What's that?
Can we keep the question for after for everyone?
Downstairs or the drinks?
No, just now so that we can hear it.
So, obviously, you know, I'm interested in bringing you all here. So, if you do want to come with us, we're going this year, unfortunately, during your group trip. So, when the club is going, it's the same week, I think. So, I guess this year, none of the club members, but anybody else.
What was the date?
It's the first 2 weeks of October. We have like the first week is kind of a key week, and you can extend, but people can also, basically in the 2 weeks, you can book anything. And yeah, so we can have, anybody who's interested, we can chat about it afterwards. Anybody else next year, same time window. We're going to be there for 2 weeks again next year. We'd like to go in October. It just fits schedules where you can dive it all year round. I kind of feel like the fall is a little bit clearer than the spring. I've done both, but to be honest, you can dive it all year round. 12 months of the year, pretty much, no problem.
Question, Simon. So when Alan had to wear a wetsuit, what kind of temperature?
I will always recommend to wear a wetsuit.
Alan wearing a wetsuit.
It's not because he's cold. It's warm. It's 28 to 29 degrees. But me personally, I am afraid of rust.
So
in my
Alan wearing
bloodstream.
a wetsuit doesn't mean
No, it took me many dive trips where I'm like, dude, wear a wetsuit. And then we actually did, together with Simon, we did our advanced rec training together. And I was like, dude, now it's time for a wetsuit. I think I can claim that I convinced him to get his first wetsuit.
Yeah,
It's exceptionally sharp. Even what looks like a solid engine block, you put a tiny finger onto it.
I know, yeah,
And
all
you
the
will have
rust
flakes
and
of
the
rust
thing.
and
So I use actually a 2 or 3 millimeter, like just to cover everything. I don't actually wear a hood. I don't like hoods, but I have hit my head. So that's what I do, and definitely gloves. But that's literally not because you're cold.
I do think food is good because
I just funny to see Alan wearing a
the dead water in the rack can impact your air infection.
Me personally, with a hood, I get more equalization trouble, so that's why I don't wear a hood. I have one with me that I can pull over, but I never do that. So I'm not going to talk more about Truk Lagoon. We can talk about it later over a drink, because you've heard enough. But this can also qualify for a super duper double feature, because the week before we're going to Bikini Atoll. I know that's on every rec diver's dream. This is tech only. There's no recreational diving. Basically, the dive starts on the shallowest wreck, which is this one. This is the USS Saratoga aircraft carrier. They just came back from there. This is the shallowest you'll ever dive. That's 30 meters. So this is really no point recreational. The boats won't take recreational divers. So you gotta be tech divers. It's not actually difficult diving. It's actually easier in a way, because there's only so much penetration that you can do. But you need to be tech, and you need to be comfortable, and you need to know what long deco stops are, because you're gonna be hanging for 60 minutes every dive, just deco, and you're really far away from any decompression chamber. So, but amazing stuff. This, like I said, is one of the few aircraft carriers in the world you can dive. This is the famous Nagato. So that was one of the 2 lead battleships of the Japanese army, and they sunk it here. So it's lying upside down, so you can dive in that. It's got the famous dive helmets. There's, I think, 4 of them that you can dive. And the craziest dive penetration. Did you guys do that last week when you guys were there? The dentist. So there's a sick bay, and if you go to the back of the sick bay, you go into around the corner, and then there's 3 complete dentist sets with chair, the drills, everything's there.
One chair, yeah.
Spittoon, everything is there.
Have you said that before?
Huh?
Have you said that before? Have you been there?
This is
have
my
you
photo.
been sitting there? No.
Oh, sitting. No, this is not a toilet. This is spittoon. This is a dentist chair.
Yeah,
This is
who's
a
your
dentist
dentist?
chair. Yeah. So these were sunk. This is in the Saratoga actually itself, and there's amazing stuff on there that you have to use. So now I open up for questions for maybe more Simon than me, but any questions for us? Welcome, or we can chat over drinks.
We have a question online. How safe is it in Truk?
Safe.
Safety-wise, general safety.
I wouldn't go out at night.
That's very safe.
I mean, there's stories of people stabbing each other over a beer. Yeah, so we don't go out, except one night we go to Truck Stop, which is another Western-owned hotel, which makes Micronesia's best pizza. It's not very good, but it's all right. But basically, we stay in the two resorts. That's it. There's also nothing to do really. But if you wanted to drink with the locals, you would stand at like some corner with a hole in the wall where everybody drinks and spits the beetle nut on the floor. It's not an experience that I recommend, and I have been told about stabbings or whatever. But inside the Blue Lagoon, you're actually the safest of the entire area because all the families of the dive masters and the people that work there basically were built houses on this peninsula. So the resort's on the peninsula, and they have like multiple rows of houses. They basically are going to protect the tourists with their life because that's their livelihood. And so I've always been told the safest place on the island or in the whole of Truk Lagoon is actually in our resort.
How do you know that picture, going back a couple of slides, one more. Did you actually intentionally make it because the lights are coming out from the
Yeah, of course.
They
This is
put
at
the
55
light.
meters. There's no light otherwise. So.
What? No, they put.
Yeah,
I put a video light here and a video light there.
Right. And what camera you use?
This would have been with the D850, but you can do this with any camera. This is the kind of stuff. So if
I'm just stealing your.
if you think about photography well enough, you can take this picture with any camera. There's not much work done here. The only thing that nobody ever does is adjust the background lighting. You just need to take the picture without taking the picture, making sure you've got enough background light, not too much, not too little, and only then do you turn on your strobe. That's how you do a photo like that. You can do this with a compact camera, 100%.
What do you have now? The Eagle?
What?
What do you have now?
D850. Nikon D850. Same camera.
The housing. The
Oh, Isoto.
Oh, Isoto.
No, I
So we
can.
had a question as well on the hyperbaric
I almost secret of
Hyperbaric chamber, yeah, there is a hyperbaric chamber in Truk. Actually, not very far from the resort, but it's very expensive. So anyway, everybody has to have insurance. I think it was $50,000.
It's covered by Dan, right?
Yeah, Dan would be.
Right.
But with Dan, you got to be very careful that they actually cover that you have dove your within your
limit.
yeah,
Certification
limit.
limit.
Whereas Dive Assure is a bit more flex. They will cover it anyway. But with Dan, you need to make sure that they definitely. If I were to dive the Kili or Truk Lagoon, I think with Dan, I would check with Dan in advance because they are really tight when it comes to any. So they might tell you only if you do whatever. I would check it with them.
So does they support? They got helium.
You can get helium, but it's expensive.
It's different. We were there 1 week ago. The recruiter divers from the States, they basically it was a 6-month exercise that they imported themselves through Truck Master.
Sometimes they have, sometimes they don't.
And then they agreed to do buy what we collect and use it for us guys. So it's not something that just turn up and the boards possibly so.
But I actually don't find for Truk Lagoon that you need helium. To be honest, I think helium is not necessary. All the diving is done within 50-55 meters max. But actually, 90% of the diving, even if you're diving tech, is going to be 40-45. So like even if you do the San Francisco Maroon, I mean you could spend a lot of time on 55, but you would really just to make a point. Oh, and I also want to check the seabed. The interesting stuff is at 50 meters, 50-54. That's when you do a long dive on San Francisco, it's actually your bracket will be 48 to 54. That's where the majority of the stuff is. And I find you don't need helium unless you have to take helium.
Simon, they have helium, right?
Not always.
We have to make sure. Truck Lagoon.
We have to check it in advance if they have it.
Even the little boys don't guarantee it because it is a massive supply exercise from the States. And talking to the guys who organise it themselves, part of the exercise is getting the paperwork, part of the exercise is finding a boat that is stopping. This is not a big market that has boats turning up every day. They run out of things like hash brown one year. So they had to make
Much
sure
bigger
they
problem
could get a
than
boat.
the
It
hash
was
browns.
going past truck master would take it and look after it and deal with the importing, and then they would buy it. So it's not a thing you just tell them you're going to do it and have it next week.
Apart from helium, so for other like rebreather support they have, right? That's easy.
It's not easy. We always have to check before if they have
If they
helium.
have tanks, you again need to work out where you can buy your salt, but that's easy.
The Zorp they have. They totally guarantee that. Zorp they have, but
Yeah, they
helium,
could arrange like tank and
oxygen is no problem. Nitrox up to 80 is.
Red
is
wine?
Yeah. Red wine, not very good. Not very good.
I think Adrian's saying red wine now.
That's what I think.
Hey, particularly pertinent questions, although I'm sure we can.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Thank you so much.